We are timeless. We are timeless. Waves washing over the sand on my feet. Time is an ocean and I'm lost at sea. Tomorrow won't find us, but I still believe. Searching for you is looking for me. We are timeless. We are timeless. We are timeless. We are timeless. You are water, I am frozen. Skies are moving, I'm standing still. In the shadows of your twilight, I am falling. I am falling. I am falling. When nights last forever and days run away, the world makes us fly by into the gray. With every season, every change, you'll be the sunlight I feel on my face. We are timeless. We are timeless. We are timeless. We are timeless. are the summer, we were the tide, the clearest of azure, bright as your eyes, golden skin sundress, you were the skies. And I see the color I've known all my life. We are timeless. We are timeless. Waves washing over the sand on my feet. Time is an ocean and I'm lost at sea. Tomorrow won't find us, but I still believe. Searching for you is looking for me. We are timeless. We are timeless. We are timeless. We are timeless. You are water, I am frozen. Skies are moving, I'm standing still. In the shadows of your twilight, I am falling, I am falling, I am falling. When nights last forever and days run away, the world makes us fly by into the gray. With every season, every change, you'll be the sunlight I feel on my face. We are timeless. 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 I am frozen. We are timeless. I'm moving. I'm standing still. We are timeless. Shadows of your twilight. We are timeless. You are the summer, we were the tide, the clearest of azure, bright as your eyes, golden skin sundress, you were the skies. And I see the color I've known all my life. We are timeless. We are timeless. Waves washing over the sand on my feet. Time is an ocean and I'm lost at sea. Tomorrow won't find us, but I still believe. Searching for you is looking for me. We are timeless. We are timeless. We are timeless. We are timeless. You are water, I am frozen. Skies are moving, I'm standing still. In the shadows of your twilight. are timeless. We are timeless. We are timeless. We are timeless. We are timeless. I am frozen. We are timeless. I'm moving. I'm standing still. We are timeless.
What's up, everybody? My name is Kwa, and welcome to another LiveTALK COVID-19 series. We're here representing the USPAACC American Chamber of Commerce, serving as the president for the Northeast region. We're on a LiveTALK number 15. We're being pretty consistent here, so you got to give us credit for that. So I'm going to just skip right ahead. We got a big panel, extremely important topic over here. So I'm going to get to the house rules. Make sure you're subscribing on YouTube. Hit the like button, subscribe, make some comments, send us some questions. Email info@uspaac.com and ask some questions. Reach out. So with that, let's get started. With us is Susan. Hey, Susan, how you doing?
Hello, how are you?
Nice
how
seeing
was the
you.
weekend?
Busy with two kids. That's what it is. Busy with two kids.
Read the old one to bed, to sleep in bed.
Read, play, everything, and approaching 2 years old, going to the terrible twos. So it is what it is. Love it though.
I'll be there. Wait until he is 3.
Yeah. So everyone, Susan is the president for the USPAACC American Chamber, the national side of it, and she's gonna kick it off for us. So take it away, Susan.
Thank you, Kwa. I am pleased to be here to represent the USPAACC American Chamber of Commerce from Washington, D.C. And this year we celebrate 35 years of serving the very diverse Pan-Asian American businesses across the country and those who are also doing business from abroad. And corporations, government agencies, as well as large nonprofits who want us to succeed. Welcome to our 15th LiveTALK. First, I want to thank the Wells Fargo Bank and the Professional Golf Association for the very generous sponsorship of this particular LiveTALK. Thank you very much. 1 month ago, we talked about Americans' relationship with each other across the racial divide in the second largest and most multiracial population in the world. We started with the unrest and protests against racial injustice across the country, and also the attacks on Asian Americans because of COVID-19. We then share our individual ethnic community or racial communities' experiences dealing with racism among ourselves and from outside groups. And after the show, we heard from our viewers, you want more. And this is why we're here today again, to bring back to you a diverse panel, a little different from last month, but they are going to talk about the next step. Where do we go from here? Today's theme, E Pluribus Unum. The Latin translation is out of many, one. Though we are very diverse in racial terms, we're one country, we're one people. We do not want to be divided. We do not want to fight among ourselves. We want to come together. We want to get along as one country, one people. Today, to lead this discussion and put a focus on where do we go from here, is a good friend, a community leader, a passionate civil rights advocate, and an effective and no-nonsense corporate executive, Georgette Gigi Dixon, Senior Vice President and Senior Director for External Relations for National Constituents. Gigi?
Susan,
Nice to
thank
have you back.
you. It's good to see you, and it's wonderful to be back. I want to thank you for inviting me again. We had a wonderful time in our last session and last month, and we had so much to share. We learned so much from each other, Susan. But that's right, we just touched the surface. So let's bring our panelists for today, who are, as you said, just as diverse as last month. And first, I'd like to introduce Nydia Hahn, anchor and consumer investigative reporter for ABC Philadelphia News. Hi, Nydia. And Stuart Kowa, founder of the Asian American Advancing Justice in Los Angeles, California. We have Clint Odom returning to us, Senior Vice President for National Urban League, and he leads the Washington Bureau as well. Ana Valdez, Executive President of the Latino Donor Collaborative Incorporated, and Danny Vargas, Chairman of the Board, Friends of the National Museum of the American Latino. Welcome, everybody. So let's get right into the conversation. In our last show a month ago, we heard the Asian, Black, and Hispanic American community's unique experiences, struggles, and observations living in the United States over generations. Today, we're going to talk about other aspects of our lives. So, Clint, I'm going to start with you today. In 90 seconds, or maybe a little bit more, tell us, what have you learned in your work? What have you learned in your work that are shared history and shared struggles among minority groups?
Well, thank you. I'd like to thank USPAACC for inviting me again. Hopefully my behavior last time was good enough to earn me a second visit. Our struggles are similar in many ways. Our labor, both African labor and Asian labor, built this country, whether it be surface transportation like the railroad or the ascendancy of the U.S. economy as a superpower based on the textile industry and the free labor that enslaved people contributed to this country. We've got a great shared history and a real stake in this country. We've fought, African Americans have fought in so many military struggles, from the first person to be killed in the Revolutionary War to people who had been to a Navy seaman who was confined to a cooking role, who during the Pearl Harbor attacks manned an anti-aircraft gun, earning himself the Navy Star. There are great contributions in science and in engineering that have not been told in this country, and in my opinion, represents a shared experience in our communities.
Excellent. So many shared contributions that as you have said, Clint, people don't know about, and that's an excellent opportunity to make sure we get that rich history in front of especially our young people. I'm a firm believer that when you know your history, you know your greatness. When you understand your past, it really fuels your future. And so with that, Clint, I'm going to move to question number one, and this is for everybody. And we're going to spend a little bit of time there. Stuart, we're going to start with you on this one. So we agreed last time that we need to understand more about each other, and we need to understand those things a lot better. So would each of you, starting with Stuart, tell us what are some of the major contributions that the Asian community have brought to the United States, the Black and Hispanic American communities? What are those major contributions that helped make America what it is today? From your perspective, Stuart.
Well, I would like to start off with the role of Asian Americans as well as others as frontline workers in this pandemic period, because I think that reveals a lot about our contributions to the United States. I belong to the Cedars-Sinai Hospital Board in Los Angeles, California. Half of the nurses are Filipinos and Asian Americans. half. 20% approximately are health workers, either doctors or researchers or other frontline health workers. So I think that this reveals that Asian Americans and other minorities as essential workers are contributing to the health of the United States. I'd just like to add one thing that to what Clint said, and that is that not only are we recognizing our own contributions, but historically, other minorities have recognized our contributions as well. I'd just like to quote something from Frederick Douglass in 1869. This was a time period when Chinese were castigated by the Republicans and Democrats. He was asked, "As for the Chinese, I would favor such immigration. Would you have them naturalized and have them invested with all the rights of American citizenship?" He said, "I would." "Would you allow them to vote?" "I would." He said, "I want a home here, not only for the Negro, the mulatto, and the Latin races, but I want the Asiatic to find a home here in the United States and feel at home here, both for his sake and for ours." I just want to express that historically, we have supported each other. It is not something new. Of course, we need to build multiracial unity for our democracy now, but it is a historical phenomenon that we've supported each other.
Absolutely, Stuart. We are stronger together. I think that's the theme of what you just shared. And that is amazing that long ago, Frederick Douglass was fighting for immigration, and immigration in a way that would bring Chinese into the country and give them a home. I think that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. Anna, how about you?
You know, it's so great to hear Clint and Stu talk about those subjects, because they, first of all, read my mind. But it is true. We have helped each other for the longest time. Let me start with the fact that some people don't remember that Latinos were in large parts of this country even before the British colonizers arrived, right? Sometimes centuries before. Hence, of course, the names of lots of our states: California, Oregon, Arizona, Colorado, Texas, Nuevo Mexico, Florida, and so on, right? So that gives us an incredible history that sometimes is not told. And it's the same case or very similar cases, or, you know, in ways we have the same experience of not being recognized in the curriculum, in the role models. You know, you, Gigi, mentioned how it's important to see ourselves reflected in order to know ourselves and find the power that we have within. But let me tell you two examples of what Stu was saying about how we help each other. So there was a woman called Sylvia Mendes at the beginning of the century. And she grew up at a time when Hispanics were sent to Mexican schools and not allowed to attend schools designed for whites only. When she started having kids, she was told and invited by the white-only school to bring her light kids, but not her dark kids. This ended up with a lawsuit to the California school district. After years and years, they won. And the case became the legal precedent for the more well-known Brown versus Board of Education case that less than 10 years later won a huge success for all races. In 2011, President Obama awarded Mendes with the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the country's highest civilian. And in the case of partnerships with our Asian brothers and sisters, there was a guy called Ralph Lazo, the only non-Japanese American to voluntarily stay in internment camps, because he thought that being neighbors, being friends with his Japanese brothers and sisters, forced him to feel the same experience in order to advocate for it after. His advocacy contributed to the Japanese American Civil Liberties Act of 1988. And I want to go back to the same Mexicans hiding African Americans to cross the border to Mexico. So they got their freedom because Mexico never accepted or approved in any way slavery. So just, supporting and quoting all of the previous comments in this conversation, we work together better than separate.
Excellent, Anna. And so understanding that the Mexicans were involved in a sense in the Underground Railroad for African Americans to escape from slavery. Amazing. And I bet you our young kids don't hear that in school, not even today. Nydia, let's hear your perspective.
Did you call on me, Gigi?
Yes, ma'am.
I think it's so nice to see you again, by the way, and thanks again to USPAACC for hosting another conversation. This is so terrific, and such an honor to be with all of these other panelists. So the question, I think, was, what the major contributions of our different ethnic groups has been. And I really feel that while there have been so many extraordinary Asian Americans who have done so many great things and achieved so much and contributed so much to this country, I also think a lot about these so-called ordinary citizens, people who have enriched this country simply by being who they are. And I think sometimes the diversity within the Asian American Pacific Islander group is forgotten. Our heritage hails from 30 different countries. As a group, we speak more than 100 different languages and dialects. And so the scope of contribution is wide and really diverse. And of course, I do think about people who broke barriers and who really championed and have fought for civil rights and human rights for all communities. I think specifically of people like Mia Yamamoto. She's 77 years old right now. I had the honor of meeting her a couple of years ago, and she's become a friend of mine. But she was born in a Japanese American internment camp in Arizona in 1943. She says she was born doing time. But instead of being resentful of the US government, she served her country. She served in Vietnam. And then she became a criminal defense attorney, a civil rights activist, and continues to be a champion for human rights across the world. And, she is someone who is a big proponent and supporter and advocate for the Black Lives Matter movement. Her father was actually a lawyer, and he was a card-carrying member of the NAACP. And so when I think of people like Mia Yamamoto, I also think about, again, people who have broken barriers in extraordinary, courageous ways. She was the first openly transgender lawyer in California history. I also think of Fred Korematsu, who fought against the internment of Japanese Americans. His daughter, Karen Korematsu, is now working for a foundation in his name, and she is working to end discrimination against all kinds of groups, including Muslim Americans and Black Americans. And so I do think that there are so many Asian Americans who are contributing to the country, not just for the good of AAPIs, but for the good of everybody.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Nydia, for that. Mia Yamamoto, I've heard her name before, actually. And I have to tell you, we need freedom fighters on the front line like that, making sure that the doors remain open. Her background is amazing. And I think that's what we learn about lots of civil rights and human rights activists and advocates, people who have paved the way for all of us, who have made great contributions. Danny, let's hear from your perspective what those contributions are.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Gigi. I want to thank the Chamber and my fellow panelists for the opportunity to speak. It's incredible when we think about our nation's history and we think about the fact that there are so many pages, entire chapters missing from our history books, just like there are stories missing from our museums. That's why we're working so hard to make sure we can create a National American Latino Museum on the National Mall that would stand alongside the National American Indian Museum and the National Museum of African American History and Culture, because those stories really are important to all of us, not just our different ethnic groups, so to make sure we understand who we are as a nation. We're told in elementary school that the American story begins when the British get to Jamestown, Virginia in 1607. Unfortunately, as far as I'm concerned, that story begins 114 years before that, on Columbus's second voyage to the New World, when he arrives on the shores of what is now U.S. territory in Puerto Rico. So we're But we're told that the American story goes from Virginia to the north and to the south. As far as I'm concerned, it goes from the Caribbean up to Florida, onto Alabama, Mississippi, Texas, California, as far north as Wyoming. So by the time the British get to Jamestown in 1607, there's already a bunch of Latinos saying, bienvenidos, what took you so long? But those stories are missing, just like the fact that we have fought in every war that this country has ever had. I'm a veteran myself. I like to talk about those military contributions. If it weren't for Spanish General Bernardo de Galvez and over 11,000 Spanish troops, General Washington likely would not have won the War of Independence. And just like the first admiral of the United States Navy was David Farragut, or David Farragut, who was the first admiral during the Civil War, who said, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. Or the over 500,000 Latino troops fighting in every theater of World War II. Or in the Korean conflict, the exploits of the 65th Infantry Regiment, the Borinqueneers of Puerto Rico, setting the gold standard for the bravery of a combat unit, or the thousands of Hispanic surnames etched on the Vietnam Memorial War, and the young Latinas and Latinos fighting in the battlefields of Afghanistan and Iraq. We take a backseat to no one in the defense of liberty, and there are 61 Hispanic Medal of Honor recipients. You know, the other important thing is that we as a community are incredibly diverse. We are Afro-Latinos, we are Asian Latinos, we are blonde-haired and blue-eyed, we are mulattos and mestizos and everything in between. I myself, I'm a genetic stew, but that's us. We are not a race, we're a culture of some very common shared fundamental values around family and faith and freedom and optimism and passion and pride, and those are the qualities most need in our country today. So when we look forward, we know that by the year 2045, our nation will be a minority majority country. We need all of us rowing in the same direction if we hope to make this nation a better place. You know, in the Hispanic community, we are 18% of the population today, over 60 million people. But we know that within a generation and a half or so, we'll be 30% of the population. Today, we are 4.7 million small businesses and $700 billion in to our economy for our business community, $2 trillion of purchasing power. So we need to come together, not only as a Hispanic community, but all minority communities to come together to make this nation a better place.
Again, that's fantastic, Danny, and absolutely true. We're better together. We're stronger together. Great message. Clint, I know you shared a lot at the top of this segment about all of the contributions. Is there anything you'd like to add before we move to the next question?
Absolutely. To jump on to Danny's point about contributions, at least in the military sphere, the first person killed in the Revolutionary War was an African man by the name of Crispus Attucks, a fact that is not often known. Although African American exploits in art and culture are well known, not many people know that the first open heart surgery that took place in this country was performed by a black man by the name of Daniel Hale Williams. And the procedure to store blood plasma was developed by a black man by the name of Charles Drew. At the request of astronaut John Glenn in 1962, he insisted that a black woman, a mathematician by the name of Dr. Katherine Johnson, calculate by hand the re-entry calculations that had been performed by an IBM supercomputer to make sure that those astronauts would not be stranded in space. Her story was memorialized in the movie Hidden Figures. Thurgood Marshall's work at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund paved the way for a lot of the liberties that we all enjoy as people of color in this country, whether we are Latino or African American or Asian American. He really did fight for all of our rights and in a way that made our lives and liberties today much better.
Absolutely, Clint. And, you know, I would be remiss if I didn't add a little fact about Gigi. I happen to have the opportunity to meet and to know the person who created the defibrillator. Johns Hopkins University. His name's Levi Watkins, and Levi went to Tennessee State University, my alma mater, and historically black college and university in Nashville, Tennessee. Levi was a past student government president, and that's how I met him, because I became student government president at Tennessee State. So Levi, and then a young lady named Kayvon. Kayvon's mother was Wilma Rudolph. Wilma Rudolph was an Olympic awardee. She's the first black female Olympic awardee in track and field. And so there are just so many contributions that all of our cultures have brought to these United States and to the world. My brother, if he were listening and could talk, he would say, and he could talk on this call, he'd say, Gigi, what about the guy at Tennessee State who created that piece of technology that powers every cell phone? So, it's a Black guy. So, we have made lots of contributions. And I think it is really, really important for our young people to know and to embrace the idea that greatness is already theirs. And it has been from the beginning of time. So let's go to the next question. We've talked about a whole lot of assets that have come to this great country, America, through our cultures. And that's why we are as rich as we are today in America, with intellect, creativity in the arts, science, inventions, etc. It's awesome. So are we perfect, though? Do we have any flaws? Is there anything we need to correct or adjust in our own communities as we seek changes in the broader community? Let's talk about that. How about starting out with Sylvia? Sylvia, what course corrections do we need to make? Are there any adjustments?
Anna?
I'm
Anna?
sorry, not Sylvia. Nydia. Nydia, I have lost my mind. I'm sorry about that. Nydia. Sylvia, Nydia. Sylvia must be talking about me, whoever she is. Nydia.
Sorry, I wasn't sure if you meant me or Anna. I think that the thing that I've realized most, at least about myself, like I'm no expert in this topic. I can only speak from my personal experience. And that is just that I need to check my own biases. And if I want to call on people to be anti-racist and to move in, I really need to do the same thing myself. So I learned that the hard way, I guess, a few years ago, and I learned it very publicly a few years ago. I took to Facebook after a woman yelled, "This is America" at me on a city street. I assumed she yelled that at me because she didn't think a face like mine could belong to that of an Asian American. And after a lifetime of feeling othered, I finally responded to that driver and other people like her who've made me feel othered in the past in a live Facebook video. And that video ended up going viral. Like 3 million people viewed it, 67,000 people reacted to it, tens of thousands of people commented on it. And I was shocked that such a minor incident could strike such a major chord. And I was interested in the comments, and there were so many people who expressed solidarity and support, but there were also those who clearly didn't like or agree with my message. And so I was really interested and curious to talk to those people. And so I reached out to them. A lot of them spoke to me via text message, Facebook message. But when I asked them if they would meet with me in person and talk to me on camera, they ghosted me. They just stopped talking to me and communicating with me altogether. But I'm an investigative journalist, as you said at the top of the show. And so it's my job to find things about people. And so I found some of the home addresses of these folks, and I just showed up at their doorstep one day. And interestingly, a few of them let me in, and we sat down and had these really illuminating conversations, and conversations that I didn't expect to have. So for instance, one of the people I talked to was a guy named Wayne, and he had really fueled the fire on Facebook of people who disagreed with my message or didn't like the fact that I had made that video. And so he, talked to me on Facebook for a while, but then again, when I asked him to speak to me on camera, stopped talking to me. And so I showed up at his house one day, and I had sort of conjured up this image of him that was really not flattering. In my mind, he was sort of this racist, uneducated, unsophisticated monster who lives in his basement. But I was surprised to find that, in fact, he has 2 children who are my children's ages. He's a nice guy, lives in a nice house. We both have upside down working schedules. We both love basketball. We're both Sixers fans. And we realized that we actually have a lot in common. And I recognized that I had had this knee-jerk reaction when I had read the posts of people and just assumed that if they didn't like my message, that they were a certain kind of person and someone very different from myself. And I realized when I talked to a lot of people who seemed to be on the other side, that we weren't so different after all, and that I really needed to take a minute and sort of check my own biases and try to understand people who might seem to have a different point of view. And so I think that throughout the journey that I've kind of hashtagged This Is America, I've learned a lot about the work that I need to do. And through the conversations that I've had, I think that other people have also learned the same thing and, decided to sort of take a step back and see what they can do to really try to understand someone else's experience and what it's like to walk in someone else's shoes. Wayne, for instance, after he communicated with me in the beginning, decided that he would join a fantasy football league where he was the only person who was not a person of color. And he said that the conversations that he's had with the men in that league have really helped him understand what it's like to not be a white person in this country. No one's saying that any of these things solved racism all in one fell swoop, but I think that each of these incremental steps that we can make with each other and within ourselves is really helpful.
And I think your story, Nydia, on This Is America, hashtag This Is America, is just so compelling and so powerful. I think we all have to take a look inside. I would like for everyone to kind of just chime in right there, talk about it. Stuart, tell us about how the Chinese, how this happens for the Chinese. And are there any biases and prejudices and preferences among the Asian groups?
Well, let me make a couple of points, Gigi. First of all, I think that we, as a community, have anti-Black biases, anti-Latino biases that have to be dealt with. I think there's 2 points I'd like to make. One is we need to retrieve our history, where we have worked together, where African-American leaders have spoken out on behalf of Asian Americans. I mentioned Frederick Douglass. The NAACP chapters spoke out eloquently condemning the incarceration of Japanese Americans during World War II. Martin Luther King spoke out eloquently for the self-determination of the Vietnamese people during the Vietnam War. The civil rights movement, in my estimation, was the main reason why the 1965 immigration law was changed to be more equal for Asians and Europeans. And so I think that to me, is an important part of what we need to bring to our communities in terms of how we've worked together before to deal with the biases that we have now. A lot of immigrants come over and they want to adapt to the mainstream culture. Unfortunately, part of the mainstream culture is white supremacist. And so we tend to adopt that too. The second thing I would just say is that we have to develop disaggregated data in the current era, because so many of the groups are stereotyped by the larger groups. And so if the larger groups, say the Chinese, show they have health insurance, then it seems like the whole population has health insurance, whereas the fact of it is Southeast Asians don't have health insurance. They rank somewhere near where Latinos and African Americans possess health insurance. So we need to disaggregate the data. Otherwise, our community is stereotyped in one way.
Powerful point. That's a very powerful point. Clint, what would you add to that?
Stuart's point is indeed powerful, and I would urge or suggest that we also have the problem of not just outward bias against other groups. We also have biases inside in our own groups. We've talked before about the pernicious state of colorism in our own communities, where Danny mentioned the wide spectrum of hair color and eye color and skin color within our groups. Oftentimes, these differences create a hierarchy of preference that people who are the subject of this hierarchy engage and indulge in themselves. We see this notion of otherism, not in communities that are external to our own, but our own. Someone has lighter skin, someone has straighter hair. We've got to address all of these biases, whether they be in the form of color or class. But you have to be able to understand that you are no better or no worse than any other group of people, including people in your own racial classification. When we can eliminate these divisions in our own selves, I think we can begin to see the commonality between ourselves and other people.
Very good point. Seeing the commonality. And Clint, would you also say that that speaks to just humanism, the humanity of this issue, that we're all human beings? What are your thoughts on that? Anyone chime in? This is open discussion time. And of course, we are going to circle back because I want to hear specifically, Danny, what your thoughts are here, and Anna, of course, as well. But what about this notion of humanity?
I can take a shot at this. Gigi, what you're suggesting is the same rule that we learned when we were children. Be kind to other people. Empathize and sympathize with other people. This basic notion of humanity and civility, which regrettably has been lost in the period of time in which we're living. Some of the ugliest displays of incivility are there for us all to see on a daily basis, whether they be on television or on videos, in the little boxes underneath our social media discussions. It's the worst kind of behavior, and it's not what we were taught. It's not how we came into this world, and it probably wasn't what we were taught when we were in school. These are learned behaviors, and we need to unlearn them.
Anyone else?
I think too, I mean, going back to just the humanity and finding common ground, when we can figure out the ways in which we are alike, then we can open up a space to talk about our differences. You know, the example that I gave earlier, Wayne and I, you know, we realize that we have the same hopes and dreams for ourselves, for our children, for our families. And that really bonded us and gave us a place to then discuss our fears. And we realized that it was our fears that were dividing us. Just like, you know, it's fear of the coronavirus that is causing discrimination and prejudice in a larger scale against Asian Americans right now. I think a lot about that. And then also just piggybacking on the conversation that Clint started about a hierarchy within one's own racial group. I mean, certainly Asian Americans have a hierarchy also within our own group. And I do think that's something that very much needs to be addressed.
I will add, Gigi, I think.
Yes, go ahead, Danny, and then Anna. Anna's had her hand up for a little while here. Do you mind if we go to Anna first and then come back, Danny?
Sure,
okay.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Oh,
Anna?
It's okay. Oh, thank you. It's okay. I know we'll all get our chance to talk, but, you know, I agree. I think that there is this very self-defeating tendency in our cultures about, you know, class/caste/coloring that I always address with my community, in the sense that we may think we're better or worse because we're darker or lighter or richer or poorer, but people outside our community in this country see us exactly the same. Your sister may be, you know, light and green eyes, or a little bit lighter or darker than you, but in the end, you are regarded as Hispanic. And the self-defeating footprint of judging ourselves based on those differences just divide us instead of unite us. So I know that self-perception is very important, but it's also important to know how people perceive you outside. And that is determined. And in our culture, and Danny, I'm going to speak for myself, but in our culture, when some people that arrive here in some different ways than others feel better or worse, that really is just a factor of division, because in the end, we're all Latinos. And then I want to add something that Dolores Huerta always says. He came to our kids' school, and she came to our kids' school. And one thing that she does marvelous, of course, is motivating. And all the kids were on the floor, and it's a very multicultural school. And she ended up with a big story, but conclusion was we all came from Africa, right? Historically, we all came from there. So we have that gene, and we should be so proud of it. And automatically, without any sign or signal to do it, all the kids stood up and started hugging themselves. Color, independency, nothing to do with race or friendship. They hugged themselves and they started saying, "Cousin, how great to meet you." And it was one of those scenes that our headmistress always tells, because this is exactly it. Imagine, we all come from Africa. What is the difference, right? We're all cousins. So it is a lovely way. Of course, she says it's so much nicer than me, but people started crying, all the way from the parents to the youngest of the kids. And that's the way we should always think about it. And that's how in my family, I try to encourage it. And of course, nobody's perfect, but it is true. We're all the same.
That's powerful. That is so powerful. And I'll be honest, I've actually shared that before in business meetings when we were talking about race and racial justice. And when I say, well, we're all from Africa, half of the room is like, what? And the other, and some people really are aware of that. And they've actually taken a look at that history. But Danny, let's hear from you.
So I'll add, and I'll sort of extend the remarks from Anna. One of our greatest virtues as a community in the Latino community is also one of our greatest political weaknesses, and that's our humility. We're very humble people, and we don't do a great job of standing up for ourselves and for each other. Our numbers would dictate that we should be a much more powerful force than we currently are. So we need to learn that every once in a while we need to stand up and bang on the table and make our voices heard. So we need to do more of that. But we also need to recognize amongst ourselves the incredible contributions that we have made to the building, the shaping, the defending of this nation for over 500 plus years. We've contributed greatly to every single aspect of American society. Imagine a United States of America without those Latino contributions, without Latino workers in our farms and in our factories, in our hotels and in our hospitals, in our sanitation departments, and in our Supreme Court of the United States. This country would be unrecognizable. So for those people that say, contrary to what some might say, that Latinos are a recent patch being sewn onto the tapestry of America, we are in fact a very foundational, fundamental thread woven into the very fabric of America. And those are the contributions that we need to recognize, honor, and commemorate within our own community, so we can be proud of the contributions that we've made. So whether you are a recent immigrant to this country or whether your family has been here for 20 generations, you just feel proud of the contributions that we've made to the creating of this nation, the sustaining of this nation. So a lot of that goes into the same self-view that we have of ourselves so that we can project it to future generations as well.
Outstanding. Absolutely. Very powerful, very, very powerful dialogue. And again, we're talking about what we need to correct or adjust. Absolutely, we need to acknowledge who we are. We need to acknowledge the strength and the power of what our cultures have brought to this great country. And there are some things that we need to work on. So I've heard a couple of themes, is this whole idea of bias and bias within the culture. The fact that we've got colorism, otherism. Thank you, Clint, for those two terminology. Very powerful to take a close look at. Do we look at our cousins and say, well, she's too dark, or why is her hair so nappy and mine so straight, or things like that? This does go on within our cultures. And I was really moved with the idea that in the Latino community, that there was actually an opportunity for a child to get a better education, but because their skin was darker than their sisters and brothers in the Latino community, they may not have been able to go to that private school. That's a sad truth. And I do believe that those things exist today. So we've got to be conscious about leaning into those dynamics when we see them. I think I've heard also today, and I heard it in the last session, we're better together. If I see that type of behavior being exhibited against my Latino sisters and brothers, then I can lean in and speak to that. It doesn't hurt me to be an ally, to be an active ally, and actually to be a freedom fighter for all of us, all people of color. So, with that, we're going to continue this dialogue some because I do think that there are some other things that we can share with our participating audience today that might help them think about how they can get in the game. Let's be active participants in moving this agenda together, to forward together on how we're going to come together. Any ideas of how we might facilitate reaching across the different barriers that might exist between our cultures to bring us together? Anyone want to chime in on that?
I mean, I think one of the things that we really need to work on is shattering the model minority myth for Asian Americans. It is so destructive to the Asian American community as well as the community at large. You know, many people don't realize this, but the Asian Americans have the highest poverty rate in New York City. And unfortunately, that group has a hard time getting funding or help or any sort of advocacy because there is this idea that Asian Americans are all successful and that we don't need help. And so we need to shatter this idea that all Asian Americans are engineers, doctors, and lawyers, because it also, I think, is an obstacle and a roadblock to Asian American children dreaming of doing other things. And certainly in our history, there have been fighters in the military, fighters for civil rights, and there have also been incredible rebels and artists and writers and architects and web wizards and all sorts of things. And so I think that's something to consider. And then most importantly, the problem with, of course, the model minority myth is that it is at its core anti-Black. I mean, it was created to essentially say to our Black brothers and sisters, hey, look at this Asian American group. They've overcome obstacles and discrimination and challenges and become these extraordinary people. But it discounts and completely dismisses our history of how Asian Americans came to this country versus how Black Americans came to this country. And it dismisses, you know, hundreds of years of oppression and slavery. And so I think all of those things need to be considered and thought about and sort of brought to the fore as we're having these conversations about how we can work together and how we can move anti-racism forward.
And so, Nydia, you know, hats off to you for #ThisIsAmerica and also for your efforts even today to be very transparent and open about that, to try to move the needle forward. You know, what are some other things that Asian Americans can do to help resolve this myth?
Well, I think that this is a time period where protests have been great. My sons go down to the protests with their cousins all the time. But I think we have to take a leap between the protest and making policy change and behavioral change. So in Los Angeles, I can say I've been contacted by 4 or 5 Asian American groups in just the last 2 to 3 months who want to engage with Black groups and Latino groups. There has been years where these groups have been disengaged. There has not been engagement to discuss tough issues. So just in the last month, we had a press conference of about a dozen Asian American organizations and elected officials for affirmative action, both in our interest as well as in solidarity with Blacks and Latinos. We are planning the Urban League and the Chinese American Citizens Alliance are combining efforts, and they're going to the police commission in about 3 weeks to testify about how police brutality needs to be stopped and to discuss how what measures need to be taken. We have worked with the Latino organizations in the disaster relief initiative that the governor pushed to help them documented get some relief from being unemployed during the coronavirus. So we actually helped 8,500 people in the Asian community, and the Latino community helped thousands more. So we are combining our efforts. We also are working on a curriculum. I helped to raise $2.5 million out of the $5.5 million for the PBS special on May 11th and 12th. And so we are working on the curriculum as we speak to actually push ethnic studies throughout the United States. We're working on the Asian component, but there will be a Black, Latino, and American Indian component as well. And finally, let me just say that we are addressing the anti-Asian violence that Nydia talked about, where over 2,500 people have been attacked or verbally assaulted in the last 3 months. And we're seeing that people are very fearful to even go outside, and that's affecting how people are getting tested. So we need to fight that, and I'm glad to say SEIU has joined with us to oppose any kind of anti-Asian violence, as well as the Black and Latino caucuses in the Congress. So we have to unite in order to move things ahead.
That's fantastic.
Stuart, our station just created a PSA that we're now airing to talk about the attacks against the Asian American community and to really inspire and motivate and encourage people to stand with our community in allyship, to stand for us, to speak out with us. And we really are trying to encourage people not to be silent about this issue. And so when we were creating the PSA, the original idea was that you would just see myself and Jacqueline Lee, one of our other Asian American reporters, in the PSA. And I said, absolutely not. This cannot be about Asian Americans. It has to be about all of us. So we need to see all of our on-air people, all of the diversity, and everyone saying together, join us, speak out against racism, let's do this together. And so that's exactly what we did. And I hope that it's effective. But I think anytime we think about these kinds of campaigns, it can't be about one community, but it's got to figure out a way to bring everyone together in a visual way and also in a real way, as Stuart is saying.
Well, that's a clear example of why it's important to even have diverse people at the table planning those types of productions, right? So that you can bring that thought leadership and those types of actions to bear. Thank you for that, Nydia. I think Anna has her hand up. Anna?
Yes,
and then we'll go to Clint.
And what Nydia just said is so important. And what you said that you supported, Gigi, we need people from our communities building those efforts. People that don't understand the challenges, as much as sympathetic as they can be, cannot really cover the spectrum of what that entitles. And it's really, really important. And then going back to what Danny and also Stu said, I believe that building our voices, and I'm not going to speak for other communities, but I'm going to tell you what would we all feel within the Latino community. We need to build the power to go beyond the tradition of, be quiet, don't make waves, your work will speak for you. We need to get out and build this voice of activism, of unity, because we want to do it. You saw the marches and the protests with Black Lives Matter. A big percentage of it were Latinos, young and old. People want to help, people want to unite, but we don't go beyond that. It is, it's the bridge, what Sue was saying, is the bridge between wanting to do it and then going to organized efforts and then building your own and creating change within your own community and within your own small and large community. So for me, that's very important. Thank you, Danny, for bringing it up. And then another thing I wanted to say is that amongst our communities, we have all the role models that we need, all the mentors, all the teachers, all the examples. We actually are most of the times treated as one community, right? What some people call people of color. So we're already being put in one basket. We need to take advantage of that. And I'm not naive to think that it's not going to be hard. Many efforts have been out there just working hard on dividing us. But we really have the power of going beyond that. Groups like this, efforts like the one like Susan and Gigi are putting together, individuals like the panelists in this panel, we believe in this, and we have the power and the leadership to do this kind of conversations and changes. So for me, I feel responsible to do this within my community and my friends and my even my personal group. And I commit with everybody in this panel and with the audience to work really hard on doing it.
Can I please dovetail on what Anna just said? I think it's very, very important. You know, we all suffer from discrimination, all of us in our different communities, you know, because of the way we look, because of our last names, because of where our families happen to come from. And that discrimination takes a lot of forms, everything from limits to, you know, how much we're able to aspire to outright violence. You know, one of the oldest Latino civil rights organizations in the country, LULAC, was formed about 100 years ago because of lynchings that were taking place of Mexican Americans in Texas. This month, we celebrated the first anniversary of a horrific attack that took place in El Paso, Texas. There was a madman who traveled over 600 miles to El Paso and killed over 20 innocent people in a Walmart, men, women, and children, because he was afraid of the Mexican invasion, as he called it. You know, had that individual learned about American history, that American history is Latino history and vice versa, that they weren't invaders, these were people that have been living in that section of the country for probably close to 500 years. Had he known that information, he would not have attacked those poor innocent people. So yes, what we're striving is to illuminate the American story for the benefit of everyone, not just the Latino community, so that the entire nation can benefit from it. But together, if we can come together, all of our different communities, we can defend our people, we can effect change, and we're united, we can strive for a more perfect union.
Absolutely. Clint?
One of the things that we've tried to do in the National Urban League is, and this is not a radical notion, but it is not as common as you would think, is that even though we are a 110-year-old historic civil rights and economic empowerment organization focused on the economic improvement of the lives of African American and other underserved communities, bringing members from other underserved communities into leadership positions in our organizations, both, you know, the national staff and in our local affiliates. We've got 90 affiliates in 36 states throughout the country. Our client service base has really evolved from mostly focusing on African Americans to as much as 25% of the people that we serve are Latino. There was something, just a personal anecdote. I was on our Twitter page not long ago, and we were celebrating the fact that one of our top executives was being acknowledged as one of the top executives in Washington, D.C. for government relations, and I won't embarrass the person by saying her name. And in response to that tweet, we got a note from someone saying, Latinos should not be working in African American organizations. Why is that? Why do we have to have Latinos working in African American organizations? I was livid. If I could have gone through that computer and found that person, I would have had some choice words for that person. That person's employment and leadership inside my organization makes us better. It makes us more attuned to issues that just in planning and in advocacy and in strategy, that we are less rich because we don't have we are less rich when we don't have those views reflected in our organization. So not just do companies benefit from having diversity, but even groups that are devoted to the advancement of civil rights and political rights and human rights of a particular group could greatly benefit from having people who are not members of that organization working inside. I think it was Anna who made the point, you know, as soon as we start to think of ourselves as somehow immune from racism in broader society, we are very quickly reminded of the discrimination we all face, whether it be The Supreme Court case of Lum versus Rice, where a Chinese family was forced to go to the colored school system in Mississippi because the law said that they are colored for the purposes of the law, or hate crimes against Asian Americans resulting from coronavirus, or the political suspicion and xenophobia that comes around espionage and the Sherry Chen case and the Wen Ho Lee case. These are all instances that should be a reminder, a perpetual reminder, that no matter how much we think we've advanced in this country, even with the election of an African American president, we still have so much work to do. We are stronger when we do it together. And I'm just very excited to start seeing us put some of these principles into practice.
Absolutely. Thank you, Clint. And I have to tell you, this conversation is always so rich and such a reminder of the need for solidarity, for unity, for understanding each other, for reaching across difference and bringing a collective voice to bear and collective action around the things that are going to move our communities and our people forward in America, and not just people of color, but all people, because the whole country gets stronger when we're all working together. But we do need to understand each other. We do need to have that thirst, that yearning for knowledge of our diverse cultures, knowledge of the power that they bring to every imaginable situation that you could even engage in the workplace, in the community, in public policy, in all aspects of life. And so thanks again for this powerful, powerful conversation. And I want to wrap it up because today we actually didn't go over and we didn't get cut off. I think there's always much, much more to discuss. And if Susan wills it, then we will do it. How about that? Right, panel? If Susan says we'll do it again, do it again. But with that, we talked about this whole idea of who can play in what playground, Clint. You alluded to that in your comments. And I'd be remiss if I didn't share another Gigi-ism, that I've been with Wells Fargo for 26 years. I'm heading toward my 27th year with the bank. And I'm very proud to be an employee of Wells Fargo. I started out with a predecessor institution, First Union, years ago. We bought Wachovia, kept the Wachovia brand and name, and now we're Wells Fargo. And I have to tell you, it's been a wonderful, very interesting, and sometimes challenging journey in corporate America for a Black female at my age and my generation. But I remember when I started to structure portfolio of national relationships that we enjoy today, including the NAACP, the National Urban League, Rainbow Push, NIDOS US, which was the National Council of La Raza back then. LULAC is in the portfolio, the Latino Donor Collaborative, Hannah, thank you so much. Just lots of organizations, and hopefully I don't step on any toes by not naming the whole. Susan will solve it. Try that. But when we started to structure that back in the late 90s, early 2000s, I got feedback and pushback. When we structured the UNIDOS US relationship, there were colleagues at the time that said, why is she leading the Hispanic organization relationship? She's Black. How could she do that effectively? And so, I have to say hats off to leaders like Janet McGee, who said, absolutely, Gigi, we want to partner with you and we can do great things together. And I've been leading that relationship ever since. I have another colleague that some of you may have met, and if you haven't, you've got to meet him. His name is Reuben Varalus. Reuben joined the team last year and a half, and he's come on board and brought even greater perspective to that relationship and other relationships. And I feel like we can get more and more powerful the more we bring diverse perspectives to everything that we do. Our CEO has made it quite clear at Wells Fargo, he believes the same thing. So I think it's a good time. I think we're at a flashpoint in America, unfortunately, because of some of the activities that have taken place over the last 8 months. But we're here. Here we are. And shame on us as America we don't take full advantage of this moment in time where we can come together, we can collaborate, we can join hands, we can get to know each other better, we can understand each other better, and we can move forward and make the changes that are necessary to leave a legacy for those generations that are yet to come. And so to all of the U.S. Oh, Danny, I see your hand going up. Is there something you need to say before I move into close?
Just very, very, very quickly, Gigi, and I appreciate every comment that you just made. I just want to make sure that I highlight the fact that there are organizations, entities, corporations, nonprofits, NGOs, et cetera, that are recognizing the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion. But I also want to make sure that we highlight the fact that it's not just the communities that are represented on this panel. There's the LGBT community, there's the Jewish community, the Muslim community, people with disabilities, formerly incarcerated individuals, veterans who face discrimination when entering the civilian workforce. All of us need to make sure that we are working towards a situation where limitations and barriers are dismantled so that everyone can strive to achieve their potential.
Absolutely. I'm in total agreement with that. And you know, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that those two are a very big focus for me personally and for Wells Fargo. I'm really proud of the investments that we make. And this is not a Wells Fargo commercial, but I'm just saying that if there are other corporate representatives who are participating on this call and you all are not engaged in these relationships with these organizations and helping to move their community and world agenda forward, then come on, join it, because it is the most powerful and the most personally and professionally rewarding work that I think exists. I feel very fortunate to be able to do the work that I do and to have done it for so many years. So to all of our U.S. Pan-Asian American Chamber of Commerce members, our viewing audience for today, it's a privilege to once again have had the opportunity to moderate this discussion. In summary, I could say that we have made tremendous contributions to help build America to what it is today. Still, America is the envy of the world. And we all want the same thing: health, safety, family, peace, prosperity, and justice for our generation and the generations that follow us. If we're successful in recognizing that we have more in common with each other than we differ, and we are willing to learn from each other and walk in each other's shoes, we will be successful. We will be prosperous. And indeed, we will be rich. So let's go and get rich. Because this is a program of the U.S. Pan-Asian American Chamber of Commerce that works daily to bring opportunities and prosperity to their members, supporters, and those who join them to connect and build wealth and prosperity for themselves, their family, and their community. I want to once again thank Susan and the U.S. Pan-Asian Chamber for having me join this program. It's an honor to be with our panelists, such powerful individuals in their own right. Nydia Han of ABC Philadelphia, Stuart Kuo of Asian Americans Advancing Justice, Clint Odom of the National Urban League, Danny Vargas of Friends of American Latino Museum, love it, and Anna Valdez of the Latina Donors Collaborative. You all are powerful. Please, please stay safe and let's stay on the move. Susan?
Well, Gigi, once again, you're all wonderful. What else can I say? You covered all the waterfronts, and your panelists was just amazing, spontaneous, but well prepared on the subject matter. We could not have asked for more. You know, Gigi, as long as there is prejudice, there will be inequality and injustice. So this conversation will go on. It is sometimes not easy, but it's necessary. We've got people like you, all the 5 panelists and folks who joined us in a month ago, and recruit more. There are leaders, or as Nydia says, folks who just are common Americans who have lived a great life, have a great experiences they can share with us. So I'm grateful for you having spent your time with us today and a month ago. And we want to make sure that we all come together. As you all said, I'm not going to repeat everything you've said. There is work to do. There's a great future. As we said earlier at the beginning, the theme for this talk show is a Pluribus Unum, out of many, one. Look at what we have today. There's so many of us. The Latino, as Danny says, is huge. I didn't know, Danny. Thank you so much for the history. I'm gonna go back and tell my grandchildren. Only have two, so they better start learning. And I love to work for folks around Washington, D.C. I just adopted sort of conceptually the children of my electrician, and he talked about the tough things they have to do. I said, bring them in. I'm going to pay for the bus for them to come up to Washington, D.C. in a major city and have a tour of the Kennedy Center and the museum. So by doing these things, we can learn from each other. We are so much richer. And that's where prejudice will be dissolved, in my experience. When people get to know who we are, that we also cry, we have pain, and we suffer, as well as we celebrate our successes. So let us all close this up with one optimistic view. When we come together, we get to know each other, listen, learn from each other, and understand each other. As you said so many times today, walk in other people's shoes. That will be a better individual, will be much more understanding, and will make a bigger country, better country. Thank you very much for all you do for us today. And now let me ask our Kwali, CEO of K5 TV, who is the genius behind the scene, to join me here in thanking all our speakers, viewers, and audience. Kwa, where are you?
I'm here.
There we are. He's right in the middle. Kwa, you are a Vietnamese American. We have a few minutes left yet. Would you say something? I know this is cold turkey for you. Go for it.
Well, first of all, it's it's an honor just to be to even open up the show for this amazing panel. So thank you, Gigi. Thank you for everybody for joining. And I'm an Asian American. I came here as a immigrant in I guess 1980. I guess you would call it a boat baby. And I live in a very minority diverse city in Jersey City, New Jersey. And you know what? I mean, all this is, this all speaks, and I could relate to everything that everyone is talking about. And so I appreciate the conversation, and hopefully we can continue to keep furthering the message.
Great. Well, before we close, I want you all to know that in 2 weeks, join us again for LiveTALK, how we partner for business success. You don't want to miss that one. So therefore, email us, follow, share, and like us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Have a very great day, very great 2 weeks, and I'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye for now.
The summer, we were the tide, the clearest of azure, bright as your eyes, golden skin sundress, you were the sky.